Thank you, Lisa, so much for the introduction, and welcome to my panelists here. We are so pleased to be here today with you. Stride Education, the company formerly known as K-12 Incorporated. We are, of course, the nation's largest education services provider, serving online public schools, but we also have expanded to work into the career and technical education fields as well as adult learning. We're going to talk today about online education and talk about education reform in general. I would like to just, at this point, salute one of my coworkers and friends and colleagues, Don Lee, the chair of the Private Sector Advisory Council. Stride, we're very, very proud of Don's contribution to ALEC, and we're just proud of and pleased the opportunity to have participated over 20 years with ALEC. Let me introduce the panel with us today. To my right is my friend and colleague, Tony Bennett. Tony, of course, former state superintendent in Indiana, elected, also the commissioner of education in Florida, a teacher, a principal, superintendent, and you will find out pretty quickly a coach once he gets started, one of the more motivational leaders. Tony at Stride is responsible for leading all of our online public schools. And so our schools across 35 states with about 170, 180,000 students. Senator Rucker, I think you know, one of the stars of the ALEC conference this year, representing her district in the West Virginia Senate. What an incredible win record you have this year, too. A former teacher yourself and homeschooled your 5 children. Thank you so much for your leadership. And then Corey DeAngelis, one of the smartest folks in the education reform movement. If you don't follow Corey on Twitter, you should. National Director of Research at AFC, the American Federation for Children, Executive Director at the Education Freedom Institute, research and expertise on the effects of school choice programs. And so let's get started. I'm going to ask Tony to start things out and give us kind of an overview, and then we'll get into some questions.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon. It's great to be here with you. First, I'd like to thank Lisa and ALEC. Thanks for having us today. Thanks for the lunch. I also would be remiss if I didn't say hello to my friends from Indiana. I saw Aaron Houchin, Senator Aaron Houchin, who I taught when I was 12 years old. Eric Cook, Eric Turner, people who were true heroes for school choice in Indiana. It's a shame I got to come to Salt Lake City to see you, but I want to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, and that's the idea of school choice and how virtual instruction plays such a huge role in the choices we make for parents. And I'll do that by kind of citing the ALEC website, where it says ALEC supports, in quotation marks, innovative, parent-empowering choices. That's what Stride is. That's the heartbeat of our business, is empowering parents with innovative choices. And we're very proud of that. We're proud of the fact that we are the nation's largest online provider. We're proud of the fact that during the pandemic, Stride and other companies like Stride that offered full-time virtual instruction were the only schools in America that offered uninterrupted instruction to children. And we're proud of the fact that we serve almost 200,000 students across the country. But I want to tell you a little bit more as we look at other things that happened as we provided those innovative choices for parents. Because the last 18 months have proven choice has never been more important. And I want to talk about the fact that during the pandemic, besides the fact we offered uninterrupted instruction, last spring, we actually reopened enrollment, knowing in many states we weren't going to receive any revenues. We reopened enrollment to take more kids at the request of more parents so we could serve more children. We personify in an environment where folks are very, very conscious about equity and equality. Let's talk about choice. It's the ultimate form of equity and equality, giving any child, regardless of where they live, how much money mom and dad have in their pocket, the color of their skin, giving them the same choice my children have. We're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that we provided many resources to our partners free of charge during the pandemic. Many public school districts came to us and said, our teachers aren't equipped to do what you do. And they came to us because we have the best training program for virtual education teachers in America. So, folks, when you go home, you go back to your caucuses, and folks talk about these evil for-profit companies that are trying to make money off education for children, remember it's the free enterprise system that responded during the pandemic. It was Stride and companies like Stride that provided uninterrupted instruction, and I want to be very clear about this. Our results were better than our brick and mortar public schools this year. Our students outperformed their peers in traditional schools because they didn't have to change the mode of instruction. So please remember that. We appreciate the opportunities we have in your states. We appreciate the work we do. And we appreciate, number one, serving the best interest of America's children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for getting us started. I want to start, Corey, with a question before we drill down into online. Let's step back a little bit strategically. Is this a paradigm shift we're seeing right now in America with respect to parental attitudes toward choice? Are we reaching a tipping point? And if so, what are the policies we need to advance to accelerate that?
Yeah, the time to embrace educational freedom is now. I mean, you have parents figuring out that there's been political indoctrination in their classrooms for years, and they've figured out that the teachers' unions and government school monopoly doesn't prioritize the needs of their kids and instead protects itself at all costs. I mean, we saw this starting in March of 2020, right when the government closed down public schools. The Oregon Education Association and education associations in other states lobbied to the government to make it illegal to switch to virtual charter schools to protect themselves at the expense of families and their children at the worst time possible. Before I go on, I want to just thank Stride and Alec for having me out to talk with you guys today. This is a beautiful hotel, by the way, as well. We should do more meetings here in Salt Lake City. But look, I also want to extend a formal thank you to the advocates for school choice all across the nation, but some of the best advocates for school choice across the nation, including Randi Weingarten, who cannot stop from stepping in it over and over and over again. Just a couple of days on MSNBC, she could not advocate for reopening all schools for in-person instruction. So a round of applause for the teachers' unions for advancing school choice more than anyone could have ever imagined. So parents have found out that there isn't any good reason to fund failing, broken, closed institutions when you can fund students directly instead. People were figuring out that, well, if my grocery store doesn't reopen, I can take my money elsewhere, even if I'm using taxpayer-funded initiatives like food stamps. If Safeway didn't reopen, I can vote with my feet to Trader Joe's. And Safeway would not be able to keep my funding regardless of my choice. Families are starting to say now, like, well, you know what? I've been scrambling for the past 15, 16 months, trying to find virtual options or trying to find other types of options, including homeschooling, by the way, which homeschooling has skyrocketed over the past year. It's about 11% of households homeschooling at least one child, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's American Pulse survey. So homeschooling has skyrocketed. It's over tripled over the past year since pre-pandemic. And 17 states or 18 states, depending on who you ask, have passed bills to expand or enact new programs to fund students as opposed to systems. And Patricia Rucker, Senator Rucker, should have an award for the best win. West Virginia went from 0 to 100 real quick when it came to school choice, from having no charter schools on the ground just a couple of years ago to now having the most expansive educational savings account program in the nation. So that's something to celebrate. And I'll leave you with one more piece of information. The latest Real Clear Opinion Research polling found a surge in support, a 10 percentage point jump in support for school choice, or what I call funding students as opposed to institutions, since April of 2020, with 64% support nationwide of school choice in April of 2020 to about 74% support in June of 2021. That's Real Clear Opinion Research polling. And there's also been Harvard polling indicating the same surge in support for school choice. And it's been among the families who have the kids in the public school system. They've started to figure out that the system just isn't really there for them. And look, the main problem with K-12 education in America has been exposed. It's always been there. This isn't something new. The past year has simply shined a spotlight on this messed up set of incentives that's baked into the government school system, which prioritizes the employees in the system and the union bosses over the needs of the individual families and millions of children all across the nation. And the only way that we're going to fix that messed up set of incentives is to fund students directly and provide those institutions with true bottom-up accountability by truly empowering families. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Senator, a perfect segue. You have accomplished so much this year in West Virginia. You've talked about it throughout the week here. But if you would, though, talk about just uniquely the challenges you faced and how you overcame those politically. And then talk about why online was important for you in terms of including that in overall choice.
Well, everyone here knows, I know, the struggles that West Virginia has had with getting any kind of choice. The teachers' unions have pretty much ruled and controlled education in West Virginia. And I'm really grateful that with the support of my colleagues this year, we did get some really monumental change. I will say that the challenges really was just overcoming the misinformation that the media puts out, because of course they just say what the teachers' unions want them to say, and they don't really reflect the facts or what we actually wanted to do or our intentions. And then just, putting a little bit of empowerment and courage to some of those legislators who are just not only afraid of the teachers' unions, but just didn't really understand that by having school choice, we're not hurting the public education system. The only danger to anyone in public education is if you're not doing your job. But having choice is really just ensuring that everyone gets what they need. And in terms of online virtual, I will tell you that it is really telling. Sometimes when you know that every one of your opponents attacks something more than anything else, it gives you a clue. There must be a reason they're so scared of it. And when it came to online virtual, it seems like that is the biggest enemy in the room of all the school choice options. But how can you, especially after this last year, where all of the public schools in the nation closed, forced all students and teachers into a remote learning environment with no training and no preparation, how can you be opposed to having a program that is professional, that does provide training, that does provide proper mechanisms so that the students and the teachers can both be successful? I mean, it just made absolutely no sense. And that's what I said to my colleagues. Many of them were saying, but remote learning didn't work and it's been a disaster. And I said, yeah, having an unprepared set of systems with absolutely no training for the teachers and the students was a disaster. How about we offer another alternative?
Thank you. And, Tony, we have at Stride, we not only work with our charter and school district clients on full-time online schools, we also sell courses and systems and processes to school districts. And as you noted, we offered a lot of that for free last year at the height of the pandemic. A lot of districts said to us last year, and even said to us as recently as this fall, we're good. We got this covered. We know what we're doing. It's all working out fine. Maybe in hopes that the pandemic was ending, certainly not talking to a lot of their families. I can tell you in the last several weeks, some of these districts have been coming back to our folks on the ground in the states and saying, we're not ready, we weren't ready, we're not equipped, can you help us? From the perspective, though, Tony, of differentiating between what districts tended to offer, emergency remote learning, with the best of intentions and the best motives, versus what we do in our schools, what are some of the differences in terms of the training and the preparation and the systems in place and the accountability and those kind of things?
Well, Brian, let me start by kind of making sure I back up what Corey and Senator Rucker said. This is not a condemnation of our traditional public school system. That's not what they were trained, it's not what they were built to do. So let's just start with that. It doesn't mean they were wrong for trying, but in their effort, and Brian, you mentioned I was a coach, I would kind of equate it to comparing the difference between emergency remote learning and true virtual instruction. It's kind of like the difference between the 1992 Dream Team Olympic basketball team and maybe this year's Olympic basketball team. But I say that because, again, these folks gave it a good effort. But let me share with you, and these are firsthand things that we saw. Schools called virtual instruction by having their teachers and instructional assistants come to the schools, copy PDFs of textbooks, worksheets, workbooks, putting those things in manila folders, putting them on the school bus, putting instructional assistants on the school bus, and having those delivered to kids. They were trying, when we did get back into school, about having teachers put what we call swivels around their necks and trying to teach kids virtually. And what our partners saw is they had about a 40% student engagement. As a matter of fact, I would bet if you went home and asked your local school district, ask them how many kids they couldn't account for last year. Ask them how many kids just flat disengaged. And it was because they weren't equipped. Whereas we've done this for 21 years, our other partners in this space, folks like us, have done this for a long time. Our teachers are trained to do it. Our platform is built to do it. And what we saw this year is the number of kids we retained throughout the school year, the percentage of kids we engaged, and the number of kids who passed our courses dramatically improved. Where our public schools didn't see that because they didn't have the infrastructure, they didn't have the training, and they didn't have the capacity to deliver a true virtual environment.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, there were points during the year where we talked to folks in states, and they report that the state is literally missing 10 or 20 or 30,000 students. They don't know where these students are. Are they homeschooling, or did they go someplace else? They literally lost track of that. When you talk to our staff, we'd ask, have we lost track of students? The answer was no, because we have engagement policies. And I would say, too, just a pitch for, if you have questions in your state about the best policies around really good, high-quality online learning, it's not just us, there are other providers out there as well and other folks, but we can help you with that. Engagement policy, for example, Ohio and Oklahoma and other states have helped put policies in place that measure not necessarily attendance through traditional truancy, but through engagement. Because that's the key in online education, is our students engaged and on task. Now, having said all that, Corey, there was actually some backsliding this year. Despite the states being awash in federal dollars, despite the urgent need for online, it was being met in some cases by the high quality offerings of providers like Stride. There are states that took a step backward in online. What do we make of that, and what do we do about that?
Yeah, before I answer that, I want to hit on something that was just said. Look, this isn't an us versus them conversation. This is just a pro-freedom, pro-choice kind of conversation. We're calling to fund the student directly to allow them to choose whatever type of school works best for them. That could be the government-run school, it could be a public charter school, it could be a private school or a homeschooling option. And the way that I like to explain it to people is that allowing people to choose their grocery provider isn't anti-Safeway. Just wouldn't even make sense for anybody to say that, right? I mean, allowing people to choose their school isn't anti-public school. We just want people to have the choice and the money to follow the child to wherever they're getting an education. One way that there is a huge potential for backtracking going forward with the charter school options is a House Appropriations Committee at the federal level passed a bill that would essentially eliminate all federal funding of public charter schools. There's a little bit of arguments of which ones they would apply to. But look, charter school students already receive about 2/3 of what was spent in their residentially assigned school, which is totally inequitable already, and this would only further exacerbate those inequities. Why should a child be valued any less just because they choose a school that they're not residentially assigned to because their government-run option didn't work for them? That just doesn't make any sense. So we should be on the lookout for those types of threats to educational freedom and individual liberty going forward. But there's also some states, such as Florida, that backtracked on the virtual learning options as well. So we need to keep an eye out for those kinds of things, and we shouldn't really care what type of education provider works best for a family. If we support school choice, we should support all types of school choice, whether that's in-person or virtual, whether that's private or charter or public schools. It doesn't matter. We should all be singing the same tune and not prioritize one type of instruction over the other. We should fund students, not systems, and let families be in control of their children's educations.
I was going to ask, and I'm still going to ask it, but it's a little different question now. What do we foresee for the coming school year? It seems to be changing almost hourly. Masks or no masks, plexiglass, no plexiglass, online or not online. I mean, what might this school year look like in your view? But more importantly, what does that suggest in terms of what lessons we should take from a policy perspective?
Well, I can tell you, in West Virginia, they still haven't even announced whether or not the students will be going back to full in-person for the fall. They haven't made up a decision regarding masks, although I have a suspicion what the decision is going to end up being. They have not determined the sports policies and extracurricular policies, and our schools are supposed to open up in 2 weeks. And this kind of uncertainty just makes parents again, choose another option, and thank goodness they now can. I mean, you can't expect parents who have work obligations to not know, whether or not their child is going to have a safe place to be during the day or not. And it is one of the reasons I think it's just feeding, students and parents having other choices other than this.
Look, it's time to free our children from the grasp of the public school teachers' unions. It's about time to put the power in the hands of families and to let them choose what's best for their kids. We have all these ridiculous masking mandates coming back after collusion with the teachers' unions and the CDC, which are essentially the same organization at this point, as their emails in the New York Post have revealed. And look, the teachers' unions love this constant state of disarray and chaos because it allows them to use this state of disorder to argue for more resources from the taxpayers and to extort those resources from the taxpayers. And look, families shouldn't have to wait for the decisions to come down from the government and the teachers' unions. Families should be able to make those choices right now, regardless of what the teachers' unions want. Because look, the education system and education funding is supposed to be meant for educating children, not for propping up and protecting a government institution. We should fund students, not systems. That's the only way we're ever going to get away from this. And look, part of me is upset about all the harm that's happened to kids over the past year, but on the other hand, keep it coming, Randi Weingarten, because families are waking up and there's a fire behind so many parents fighting for educational liberation and freedom once and for all.
And Corey, what I might add to that too is what's so interesting is that cuts across socioeconomic lines, demographic lines. This is not looking like traditional red-blue, conservative, liberal, rural, urban. I mean, this is cutting right across.
You look at that Real Clear Opinion research polling, the biggest jump in support was among Democrats. People who wouldn't traditionally support school choice before the pandemic are now starting to figure out, well, maybe this educational freedom thing is a great idea, because even if I like my public school, maybe I want an exit option just in case they try to do some ridiculous things in the future once again. So look, I think more and more people are waking up. This is the silver lining of the pandemic, if there ever was one. And part of me says, keep it coming. Keep it coming, because more and more families are going to keep fighting for educational freedom. And look, the best part about all of this is it's the teachers union's own fault why we're seeing so much progress in homeschooling and school choice. And it's up to legislators to continue introducing these bills to fund all students. Just like if you want model legislation, look at West Virginia, what they did. Look, they provided opportunities for all families to be able to choose an education for their children. Because look, the reality is, and I think that's the best way to do it going forward too, and as much as possible, because it allows you to start from a better bargaining position. If you want to amend it down later, that's fine. But look, the teachers unions are going to come after you, and they're going to act like the sky is falling no matter what. So you might as well get many as your constituents on board to embrace educational freedom. So let's continue the fight going forward, and let's build on this momentum and keep it going.
One of the points that we make at Stride very frequently in conversations with lawmakers is that we are strongly supportive of all options, whether it's private, whether it's public, whether it's online, and we don't want to see the allies, reform allies, playing off against each other. There's room for everybody. We're stronger. We're a bigger movement. You're always building a bigger coalition, and the coalition is bigger with all of us together. I know online parents, for example, have been very active in a whole lot of places, and so this is that opportunity. Tony, briefly, what will it look like this year, you think?
Brian, I think it's going to be a smorgasbord again. I think we are going to start the year with school districts not knowing what they're doing, school districts trying to do this on the fly. I think you'll see the pushback that Corey characterized from teacher unions. I think you will see parents get more and more frustrated. And again, I will, my wife is a public school superintendent. Now, how do you think that feels? But, her whole point is, if we don't deliver, the kids need to go somewhere. And that's from a public school superintendent. If we don't deliver, we can't deliver what a child needs, we should help that child go elsewhere. And I think, Brian, I'm hoping, and I'll pass this little anecdote around, I had a superintendent call me this past week and said, we want to build a partnership with you. We want to put all of our virtual kids in one of your Indiana schools. And oh, by the way, we don't want any money for it. We're awash with money. He said, we just want to make sure our kids who choose virtual have a good option. So, Brian, I think we're going to start seeing that. I think we're going to start seeing school districts say, we can't do this. They will come to us. And I think what we need to do is be there and serve them much like we did last year, because we got a lot. There was a lot of positive with us opening our doors in the spring, providing professional development to public school districts. A lot of positives out of that, and we're very proud of that. And I think that's going to continue this cycle. I think we're going to see, because I think we're in a very uncertain time, both socially and with the pandemic.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, something I'd like to add, based on what Tony said, is there are going to be inequities going forward as well. It's going to be a lot of differentiated responses, and the places that have stronger teachers unions are going to have fewer options for families. But the reality is, the most advantaged in society are going to have choice no matter what. More advantaged families are more likely to have school choice already by being able to buy their way into the best neighborhood schools, and to be able to afford to pay for private school tuition and fees out of pocket, and to pay for a private tutor going forward. It's the least advantaged that are the most adversely affected by these restrictive government policies that the teachers unions push for to protect themselves, again, at the expense of the least advantaged in society. So school choice is an equalizer, and if we really care about equity, we would call to fund families directly so that more parents have educational options for their kids going forward.
And one final thing I want to add, as been mentioned, all choices. Be open to all, because not everyone's going to be served by the same choice or the same option. And all of the choices have something that someone can gain from.
Amen, Senator Rucker.
Thank you so much, Corey, Senator, and Tony. We really appreciate your time, and we'll wrap it up. Thank you.